Growing up in Cave Spring was fantastic. My family, I went to E.S. Brown Elementary School. I was a little after Fairview had closed and this new E.S. Brown school was there. But I also remember playing ball, and we would look down at the white school, and yeah, they had all the amenities, they had all the things. We didn't have merry-go-rounds, swings, or any of that, but we had some softball. You didn't want us to play that ball. And boys and girls, I would pick girls on my team or boys on our team, and we would go for it. So we look forward to that every day. I grew up in Cave Spring, and I was very proud of it. So on the baseball team, when I was 12 years old, we won the state championship. I was the all-star pitcher. I was the leading hitter, the leading home run hitter. I broke records. I was very successful. And at the end of the season, we were going to have a little picnic, a little party recognizing our great baseball team. And all of the guys were friends. We were friends, black and white and everybody. We had a party, and it was going to be, we were going to the Cave Spring Park. We were going to go to the park, which the city was named after this park. And so I went into the park. He said, hey, this guy jumped and hollered to me, "Hey, no niggas aren't allowed in this camp. This is just for white people." And I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know why he was hollering at me. These are my friends. We were all together. We loved each other. We had fun together. Why can't I go in? And the mayor later came to my house and explained to me and my mom how that was wrong, and he was sorry for that, and he hoped he can make up for it in some way. And so we sort of understood that. But I took that from then on. I continued to be an outstanding basketball player. And when I finished from the 7th grade at E.S. Brown, they were closing the school and they were going to Cave Spring. They assumed, well, we're going to get Mike Glenn at Cave Spring High. But they didn't want to take my mother, who was the best teacher that I ever had, from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and at home. We had lots of books in every room at home. And so my mom was there, and they weren't going to allow her to come to teach. They said, we took one of the teachers, and they turned her to a librarian. Miss Parrish was a librarian. She was not a teacher. And so she said, okay. And Coosa said, we want you, Miss Glenn. We want you to come to Coosa and be a teacher at Coosa. And so they explained to me. My mom and dad sat me down and said, you don't have to go, but Mom has to go to Coosa. She'll have to drive to Rome about 13 miles away every day. You can ride with her, or you can just walk down here 2 blocks to Cave Spring School. I said, no, I'm going with you, Mom. I'm going with you. We'll show them people from Cave Spring. And so I went with her to Coosa High School and took all the harder classes and had more competition and more friends. And we went all the way to the state championship game my senior year. And we were a AA school. We were a bigger school. Cave Spring was the lowest class that they had. And we were very successful. We lost the state championship game, but I was recruited through all states. And I went to Southern Illinois because I wanted to leave the South a little bit. I had enough of seeing the racism from the South. I thought it might be better from the North. And I knew what great things Walt Frazier had done. I knew he had come from Atlanta, and they wouldn't let him play quarterback. And he said, I'm going to Southern Illinois. And he took Southern Illinois to the NIT championship and was the Knicks' first pick, was Walt Frazier. And I got to meet him my freshman year. We retired his jersey. And I was in many ways following in his footsteps. He has that same kind of pride. He learned who he was when he was in high school. He went to Howard High in Atlanta. Just like I had gone to E.S. Brown School, I knew who I was. I had learned all the things through all the black history classes and all the black history people. So there was no news to me. It was just doing what I was taught. My mom taught me in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And I could never understand at first why she didn't want me to just call her mama. She said, no, when we were at school, you called me Mrs. Glenn. So I learned to do that. And Mom always taught. She had a lot of, we were watching films. Black history was alive to us when we were at E.S. Brown. She told us about all our people before us had done and what we inherited from them. So we look at films on Booker T. Washington, and Frederick Douglass was her first her favorite. And Frederick Douglass said, once you learn how to read, you'll be unfit to be a slave. And so we had to recite that sometime. We had to say speeches in the morning and quotation marks, and that was fun. We always wanted to say a good quote, a different one, good, better, best. I would not let it rest until my good is better and my better is best. And of course, that was George Washington Carver. And so we had a lot of things like that that we learned, but we studied about Frederick Douglass and all his great contributions, and we knew who John Brown was and Nat Turner, and we knew those things, that we talked about them at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and in classrooms. And we had dances sometimes. We would have dances and learn how to go do-si-do and reels are real. So we had great fun at E.S. Brown. We loved the students there. We loved the teachers. They gave so much of themselves to us. They wanted us to understand the challenges that we would have, and that we should know who we were and who we can become. And so I'll never forget all the things that they taught us at E.S. Brown Elementary School. And my mom taught me for those 3 years. And sometimes she'd have two classes, third and fourth grade would be together, or fourth and fifth would be together, and that was okay. And we knew our lesson, and we knew our quotations, and we learned those things. I think that E.S. Brown gave me confidence. When I went to Coosa, I wouldn't talk a lot in classes, but I was going to make all A's. I was going to make the best grade in the class. I wanted so much to be valedictorian. I finished third in my class of 200 at Coosa, and there's 3 black people. I was president of the class, president of the math club. A lot that I took from E.S. Brown, and I knew who I was, and I knew that I had learned so many lessons from magazines like Ebony Magazine and other things. I knew a lot that a lot of people didn't know. And so I never lacked in confidence, and that included in my baseball. We had won, as I mentioned, a state championship when I was just a young kid, and then we went on to Coat League, and we went down to Florida after we had won Georgia to see if we could win the Southeast Regional Championship. So I never lacked for confidence. And then going to Coosa, I started as a freshman. I was a starting guard and had a good freshman year, and I kept on just playing well, doing the things that I could do. And I might mention also that Fairview and E.S. Brown were part of our history, but so was Georgia School for the Deaf, because the principal there, Mr. Purdue, would come to my dad at the end of each year when Dad was coaching every sport that they had, basketball, softball, track, and everything, and he had no money. He got no money. He coached 18 years and got no money. He said, Mr. Glenn, you did a good job. He'd shake your hand, and he told him, you could take your son with you now. You take your son with you to the games, and he would take me to the games, and I was absorbing how they could become great and what opportunities lay ahead. So I got so much from the deaf school, and a lot of people did, from having their relatives work at the deaf school and cook and clean and work there. That was really a blessing. So even though we had an isolated kind of experience, we were all black and we had secondhand of so many things we could do, but there were so many things that we could do. And Oscar Robertson, who was my hero growing up, had a book called But They Can't Beat Us. And so that was our attitude. Our attitude was, we can be a star. We are stars. And you can go on and you can have your swings and slides, but you can't beat us. So I carried that with me throughout my life, that your talent and your desire will take you and help you to be a star. It's so unique that Cave Spring was a little small city, and we had these isolated schools, and we learned from each other. We cared for each other. The older kids cared for us, and we looked up to them. We wanted to learn how to hit and run like they did, and we wanted to learn how to play ball like they did, and we wanted them to be proud of us. And we went to high school, and we were stars at the schools and for football, baseball, basketball, and in the classroom. So we felt we were in a very unique situation at Cave Spring High School. It was very unique. So it was very unique to be in Cave Spring. It was very unique to have the people that had experiences like we had. So we enjoyed it. We loved it. We loved each other. We tried to help each other any way that we could. And we tried to help each other to be successful in one way or another. My mom and all of the teachers did that. All of the leaders did that. You saw what so many people were doing. Some breaking into University of Georgia, University of Alabama, different opportunities. And so we knew we could do whatever was in front of us. So we weren't afraid of the challenge or a chance to go there. And interestingly enough, after graduating from E.S. Brown, I went there all 7 years of elementary school, and then going into the 8th grade and being one of the best scholars in the 8th grade, and then started being a class officer 9 through 12. And so we had an opportunity, and I wanted to go to a school that was a little more integrated. I wanted to leave the South. I wanted to go to Southern Illinois. I knew that Walt Frazier had done likewise from Atlanta, and they wouldn't allow him to go play quarterback. He was a quarterback on the football team. They wouldn't allow him to play quarterback, so he went to Southern Illinois, and he just played basketball. And what a great basketball player Walt Frazier was. He left a great example, and he's a great friend of mine now. He supported the campus and done so many things. And I think that part of my education at E.S. Brown School, it got me ready to meet a Walt Frazier, to have the confidence in there, and to know that I could be successful because I was successful at E.S. Brown School. So I'm so thankful for E.S. Brown. I would not have it any other way. I would want to have gone to E.S. Brown those 7 years. I think they helped to make me what I was, and they helped to make me what I am. I think it is so important to restore Fairview, for people to know that there was a Fairview. They want to know who was E.S. Brown. They want to know that he went to Harvard. Edward Brown went to Harvard, and we should be proud of that. Case Ring High didn't have anybody that went to Harvard. He was a friend of W.E.B. Du Bois. He married Charlene Brown, named after him. They married, and so we should be proud of our heritage in Case Spring. We should be proud of Fairview, proud of the people that came through and the things they could do. They could sing, they could dance, they were smart, they could do everything. They tried to take everything from them, but they prospered in Case Spring, at Fairview, at E.S. Brown. They prospered, and they should be proud of that and know what their ancestors did. I think the Rosenwald schools did a great thing by educating people, and they thought they were educating them so they could be workers, and it worked. It did help them to become workers. They got better jobs, better opportunities because of it. But not only that, it taught them who they were. And they learned that black people could do anything. And you had ancestors that were enslaved and tried to hold them down. The society did. They had to overcome society and teach people what was fair. And your people led institutions, and they led movements and civil rights movements and anti-slavery movements. I learned about Frederick Douglass, and I remember later when I started collecting a lot of black history, I had a book that was published in 1845. It was Frederick Douglass's book, and it's called Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, published in the Anti-Slavery Office of Boston. And then when kids see that today, published in the Anti-Slavery Office, it was an office like that, and they want to touch it. Can I touch it? So just to let them come and touch it, and they feel the power of black history, not only touching the source of it, but understanding the message of it. So I understood the message very early, and I knew that I had a responsibility to share it with others. And now with my black history, I've done exhibits all over the country. We've gone to New Mexico, California, New York. We've gone a lot of different places and shown from boxing to academics to leaders that showed America how to be great. And a lot of this was done through their efforts. My message is that you can do anything you want to do. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. It's almost funny because you know that your foreparents, your parents that were enslaved and with shackles on them, and look what they did. Look what they did. Look how they overcame it. Look at Frederick Douglass. Look at what he had to overcome. Learn the lessons that they went through and learn how they overcame, and that you can also overcome, because your challenges are not as great as theirs, I assure you. Southern Illinois, Dick Gregory had gone to Southern Illinois. Walt Frazier had gone to it. Some people had paved the way for me, and there were some great athletes there. 100 years before there was integration here in the South, so it was great. And I had white friends, black friends. I had friends in the South too, though. I had great friends. So I found them to be a little bit more hospitable in the North, though. And then we would play some places in the Northwest, even like Seattle and some of those places. It was entirely different. You would talk to people and they would respect you as a person. They wouldn't look at you like, you're going to take something from me. They wouldn't have that kind of attitude. They would just talk to you, and just carry on the conversation. And it was great. And you felt good about it. You say, wow, this is good. You feel fully human. So I think I felt fully human there. And we had parties from Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They call us the party school. So Southern Illinois was also a lot of fun, I might add. It was great fun. So I enjoyed all of my schooling. I went in perfect attendance from 1st through 12th. And one reason is I loved school. I loved the E.S. Brown. Everybody loved the recesses because we had little recess and big recess. And we would play softball, and we loved it there. So I hated to see it rain. We to see the rain because we wanted to play, and they gave me such a leg up that I was playing softball every day and having big fun. Both of my parents are from Alabama. They both had gone to Alabama State College together in Montgomery, Alabama. They're both from Alabama. And they told my dad that there's an opportunity, they need a math teacher at Georgia School for the Deaf. But that is deaf. You have to use some sign language. So he said, okay. And he went to school there and learned sign language from his environment. That's how I learned too. You know, I never took a class in sign language, but I learned from the people around me. And so they moved to Cave Spring, Georgia. So Mom taught at Fairview, and Dad was at Georgia School for the Deaf. And so when Fairview changed and was no longer in existence, she went to E.S. Brown to become a teacher, in which she was my teacher in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. But I called her Mrs. Glenn. I never called her Mama in class. And I learned so many things and took all the lessons from home with her. And Dad went to Georgia School for the Deaf, and that's where he was a coach for over 18 years there. Never received a penny, no expense money, no anything. But they had great tournaments and great games, and I would go and I would clap for the deaf kids, and I was just so happy to be there. It was just a blessing having those schools, all of them. The deaf school was as much a blessing or a bigger blessing than Fairview and E.S. Brown School. All three of them. We had 3 schools that were helping to shape us and to form us and to tell us that we could be successful, and sets of teachers that showed that and taught that from day one throughout your finish of your schooling there. So I would love if future students could get that same kind of education and that same kind of discipline. I saw, for instance, we're going to have the 43rd year of the Mike Glenn Camp for the Hearing Impaired, for the Deaf. Yes, that I learned from deaf people, because I could go to basketball camp, but they could never go to a camp. So they wanted an opportunity. I knew they could play. I grew up with them. That's how I learned how to play. And so I wanted them to have the opportunity. So I opened a camp just for deaf kids. They wanted to meet a pro player, because if they could meet a pro player, they would never go up to him because they can't talk. So they was ashamed or afraid, or they couldn't communicate. So I started this camp, and now we have had over 50 deaf players from the NBA and the WNBA. We had great players to come to my camp for the hearing impaired, camp for the deaf. So they love it and I love it, and that helped to inform me. It helped form them. because one of my best players ever that won the most valuable player in the Mason-Dixon tournament. See, they had this tournament every year where the deaf schools would get together, an Alabama school for the deaf, South Carolina, Florida school for the deaf, and they would play in this tournament. And Willie Brown was tall and he was very successful, and he won most valuable player for 3 years. And then he came to my camp in New York, and they said, "Who is this kid from Georgia, man?" Everybody was excited, and he won MVP there for 3 years. And so Willie Brown played major college basketball, a deaf player playing major college basketball, played those 2 years at Hofstra University in Long Island, and his last 2 years he played at Georgia State University. So he was a tremendous example, tremendous success story, and we see stories like that all over now, where deaf people get opportunities, and they're much like the black people that couldn't get opportunities. They had skills, they had talents, they just wanted to show what they could do. So I'm glad that I've had opportunities to share my experiences with the deaf community through Georgia School for the Deaf. Mom and Dad always talked about how they grew up in Alabama. They didn't have opportunities, and Dad loved playing basketball at Georgia School for the Deaf. But he didn't play basketball at Georgia School for the Deaf. He played in Alabama, and he wanted to coach and teach. He loved sports, and I think it was his love of sports that led me to sports, because Mom was going to see that I got those books. I was going to learn the books. So I saw how Dad just loved it, and he coached everything. He coached everything, and I wanted to be a part of his world too. Mom was very tough. You had to, the grades were tough, and she wanted you to be a creative writer. You had to learn, okay, we're gonna have creative writing. What would you do if you were a quarter? Well, I'll try to get interest till I get to be $1. So I still have papers that I wrote when I was in elementary school from Mom, because that's what she taught. And she taught me, she taught us, she taught everybody how to be creative. She'd show those films, and we couldn't wait to see those films. Booker T. Washington wanted to have the floor so clean you could eat off of it. And we thought, oh, that was a great film. Booker T. Washington was great. So we learned the Tubman, we learned all those stories growing up. And we always had a bookmobile. My mom had a bookmobile. And from Rome, Georgia, they had the bookmobile. You would go around and you could go into the bookmobile and check out books. So you didn't have to go to a library. It would come to your house. It was a bookmobile. Of course, George Washington Carver had one of those in Tuskegee, Alabama. And so that must have been where she wanted to make sure that these kids had a chance to have a bookmobile coming to their home. And the bookmobile would come by, and boy, we were so happy when that bookmobile came by, and we'd go and get those books. And Mom would always ask us, what lesson did you learn? And so she said, you can't just read a book and not learn a lesson. So what did you learn when you read about Frederick Douglass? And I said, well, Mom, I learned this, and this, and that you'll be always unfit to be a slave if you learn to read and write like Frederick Douglass did. So it was fun. The bookmobile was fun, writing your name on the book, and it went all around the neighborhood, and it was such a great experience for the bookmobile and to libraries and to later. And I continued that throughout college. I was in Southern Illinois, a math major. I was a math major. My dad was a math teacher. And I would go to the library. I said, hey, let me go to the library, man. I would read some good books on math. And a lot of times those teachers in the exams would have questions from a book that I had also read in the library. I know that one. So that it helped me in that experience from libraries and books. So I learned a lot from those books and from my mom and dad. One thing is books, which you see in my home. I own thousands of books. Books, I love them. They're special. Poetry from books, book stories, biographies, all of these lessons that you can learn from reading books. So kids have to learn that you still can open a book and read in that book and learn a lot of lessons that can help you to be successful. What lesson did you learn? So when I would go around as a speaker and talk to kids, I'll always ask them, what lesson did you learn from that? You couldn't just hear, even a speaker come to your school, what lesson did you learn? Because mom wanted to know from us, what lesson did you learn? You read this good book, what lesson did you learn? Well, Roy Campanella, he was a great player with the Dodgers, Mom. He had his accident, left him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, but he still could teach, and he still loved the game. So I learned how you can still be a player that helps people. If you don't make it to the NBA or to the NFL, you can still have a very valuable life. And I learned that from Roy Campanella's book, and I had him quoted in my book, Lessons in Success, was the first book that I wrote. I was in a car accident between college and the pros, and I broke my neck. So I thought I may never play professional basketball again. And the doctors thought they may have to do a surgery, and I didn't want to do a neck surgery. I thought that sounded very risky in 1977, and I might add that it was. And but I healed. I went to see my aunt, because we knew that mother's sister was Murtis Pitts, like Aunt Murtis. And so I said, Mama, I want to go talk to Aunt Murtis. So I got on the airplane, still had the braces all on my neck. And she asked me, well, Mike, what do you want to do? Because you have a scholarship to go to grad school. You said work for IBM while you're in school. They're giving you a job right now today. So you can just do something else. You don't have to play basketball if you don't want to. Or you have gotten drafted by Chicago Bulls. Do you want to get healed and then play basketball? What do you want to do? And so I thought about it, and I said, Aunt Murtis, I want to play basketball. So she said, that's it. God wants you to play basketball. So she took my hand and she told me, we're going to sit right here and we're going to pray. I want you to forget about those other things. And you're going to play pro basketball. And regardless of what condition your neck's in, you will play pro basketball. I want you to believe it, and I want you to know it. And so we prayed that day that I would play pro basketball. And I got back on the plane after I talked with Aunt Murtis, and I flew back to Atlanta and came back home. I said, I'm going to play pro basketball. I'm going to play pro basketball. And so I started walking, and then I started jogging, and I said, I'm going to play pro basketball. And the opportunity came up that I was able to play my rookie year, the rest of my rookie year with the Buffalo Braves. This is when I was at E.S. Brown. I was 12 years old. I won my first trophy, and I came home, and Mr. Perdue was going into the post office. And I said, Mom, I got to show Mr. Perdue my trophy. You think it's hard for me to show him my trophy? And so I showed him my first trophy that I had won as a member of Cave Springs School. And also in this picture is Mildred Robinson. Mildred was a fantastic deaf player. I loved her very much. I wanted to shoot the ball like Mildred. Mildred could shoot. She was my first hero. And I had one guy from Southern Illinois that wrote a book about who was a hero's hero. And he asked me who was my first hero. And I say, Mildred was. He said, well, people like Muhammad Ali and I said, I understand. Mildred Robinson was my first hero. And this is Mildred. She was a fantastic player. And I would always want to know how Mildred had done. And she would pass, and she had so much patience with me. She taught me just so many things. I just really loved the experience of being in Cave Springs and at Georgia School for the Deaf. And this was my first trophy. I had one trophy, and I still have it. And it was very valuable to me, my first trophy in Cave Springs, Georgia. It was very nice. He would have opportunities. He hired almost many people in Cave Springs that wanted to work at the deaf school. It was the main employer. Most people got their jobs there. They had a living there. They had to pay for their houses there. And so he was a wonderful principal. And Dad loved working for him, because how many places would you work for 18 years without getting paid? And I still have so many pictures of Cave Springs and, Georgia School for the Deaf. Just the girls' team was fine one year. They went 35-1. They were awesome, man. They were awesome. I loved them. And then they had so much patience with me. And I would go in Dad's classes. I was sometimes when we had special holidays, and I would go to his classroom, and first of all, we would sing, "Oh, how I love Jesus." We would learn this song. We would sing the songs from devotion, and they always had patience with me, and his students taught me just so many things that it was a lot of opportunities for me that a lot of other people did not have. So to practice twice. I would go practice at high school at Coosa and come back and practice at GSD in the evening. So I was practicing twice a day, but I was just playing with my friends, so it didn't matter. They would often ask me, do you like your talking friends better than your deaf friends? I said, no, y'all my best friends, you know. So, and you will see, I was so glad to have that camp and have something special for deaf kids. And it came through GSD, it came through Fairview, it came through ES Brown. They were all connected for me. There was no one without the other. And so the things I learned from one, I learned to share with all. I think the exhibits that I've had over 35 exhibits. I've taken them all over the country. I've gone to New York. I've gone to Albuquerque, New Mexico. They had like 2% blacks in Albuquerque. I thought there was no chance, but I knew there was great players there. I wanted to do one in Galveston, Texas. So, and I've had my exhibits in New York and various cities in Georgia, at the King Center, all of them. And it's an opportunity to share the lessons that you learned from them. So these lessons, first it was a book exhibit. I had one exhibit at my son's school here in Atlanta, and it was 50 of the greatest books, first edition books by African Americans. I had Phyllis Wheatley was in there, I had Frederick Douglass was in there. I have all those books. So all of those I displayed, and I showed them what the ancestors wrote. It's very difficult to have a book then. Now you can have one copy, 5 copies, you can do it cheaply. But it was very difficult. Du Bois's Suppression of the Slave Trade, all these great books that I was able to share and have them sometime in libraries, and people thank me, and sometimes they go, "Oh, do you have an exhibit going on? Where's your where? That's where in deaf language." So they say, "Where's your exhibit?" And one time I let some of the students. I want to tell you about one student, Lois Smiley. It was one of my favorite students, along with Mildred, on that girls' deaf team. I can show her on that picture, and Lois had been burned all over and burns on her leg, and she didn't want to play. She was embarrassed. She was embarrassed to do that. But they tell her, "No, you're not going to be embarrassed. You can do it. You can try out." And so she tried out for the team. She made the team, and she had burns on legs. She wanted to cover them up. No, you can't cover them up. And Dad also tutored her individually. He thought, "You are very good in math. You can go to Gallaudet, which is a deaf college in Washington, D.C. And we tutored her. She could bring her over to the house and tutor her in algebra. He had one student, and he was teaching her. He told her, "You can do it." And she went to Gallaudet, the first deaf person, black deaf person from Georgia School for the Deaf, was Lois Smiley, and she got her degree. She graduated from Gallaudet University. I was so proud of Lois Smiley. She came to my camp for deaf kids, and she shared her experiences with the kids, and they all loved her. And Mildred came too. So they learned Mildred, who was a great basketball player who could shoot. Nobody can shoot like Mildred. Nobody can shoot like Mildred. Yeah. So yeah, Mildred and Lois were my heroes, man. And they could do it. And Dad made her know that she can do it. And she did it. And she was the first to go to the college and to graduate from it. Yes, indeed.